There is a remarkable quotation that was written by a Greek philosopher living in Athens, Greece in 125 BC. His name was Aristides, and he was not a Christian. We're not really sure what it was, but probably some pagan worship. But he wrote a letter to the Roman Emperor Hadrian describing the Christians who lived in the city of Athens. And he wrote this: Christians love one another. They never fail to help widows. They save the orphan from those who would hurt them. If one of them has something, he gives freely to the one who has nothing without boasting. If he is a stranger, Christians take him home and are happy as though he were a real brother. And if they hear that one of them is in jail or persecuted for professing the name of their Redeemer, they all give him what he needs, and if possible, to redeem him, they set him free. And if there is among them any poor or naked, if they have no spare food, they fast for 2 or 3 days in order to supply the needy. Truly, this is a new people, and there is something divine in them. Words from a pagan who's observed this particular community, this Christian community in the big city of Athens in Greece. Wouldn't it be wonderful if one morning we woke up and found this article written in the South Bend Tribune or the New York Times? Wouldn't it be nice to read that kind of an article, that the Christian community that lives in St. Joseph County, Elkhart County, Berrien, Cass County, that they lived what we just read from these Christians in Greece? Unfortunately, what often makes up the majority of the headlines that we read in the press or hear in social media are usually news about bad things: hatred, division. We are bombarded with stories of political infighting, scandals, international acts of terrorism, murders, violent protests, hit and runs, racial mistrust, and unrest. I've often wondered if we were visited by some life form from another planet and the only resource to learn about us was what they heard or saw in the media, they might have a very negative opinion about us as human beings. I think we're better than that. And yet, that is what gets focused on. That's what sells advertisements. That's what people, unfortunately, seem to want to hear. Does all this negative news really define who we are as human beings? I certainly hope not. It is certainly not what Jesus wanted. Jesus envisioned what we heard in that wonderful quote. In the gospel today, Jesus is once again approached by 2 so-called religious leaders who seek to trap Jesus. They ask him, "Teacher, which commandment of the law is the greatest?" Now keep in mind, there were 613 laws that were to be observed by faithful Jews. This was not an innocent question or desire to open dialogue. In fact, this question has been debated for a couple of centuries before Christ. The real intent here was to put Jesus in a bind. What would he answer? Because it could catch him either way. If Jesus picked one commandment from the others as the greatest, the Pharisees would accuse him of downgrading the overall Torah, which was Moses' final teaching and legacy. And if he only talked to one, then he's making sort of a light of the other ones. That wasn't what they wanted to hear. If he replied that all were of equal importance, the Sadducees would go nuts and argue he lacked common sense and was placing the ordinary person in an impossible situation. But Jesus, as he so often does in Scripture, escapes brilliantly. He speaks not one but two commandments of the Torah. The first is from Deuteronomy. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. The second is from Leviticus, another Old Testament book. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And even if you might think about it, there's a third one there that's kind of hidden. And that is the commandment to love yourself, as Jesus says at the end. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So it's not all about the others. It's about this whole human person and people we interact with. What Jesus really is saying is that if we truly love God above all things, we will do nothing willingly to offend him, and so we will keep all the laws directed towards God. And if we truly love our neighbor, we will do nothing willingly to offend them. In this way, we will keep all of the other commandments which are directed towards our neighbor. Going back to Aristides, he saw something divine in the Christians living in Athens because he saw how they loved others. What about us? What about myself? What about each one of you? We are here today because we believe in God, and we come here to show our love to God. But maybe we need to ask, when we leave this church, is our love of God visible? How would our neighbors see us? How would the Tribune see us? Would they see us as someone who would welcome a stranger? Who would never judge anyone by their condition or color of their skin? Would the people with which we work say, he is a person I can trust? He's a person who gives others a fair shake, cares for people more than money? Ask your friends, would they say he's someone they can count on, who will give you his time? If you are in trouble, he will never tear down another person. What would they say about us? As a Christian, people must see our love for others. Jesus' greatest commandment is a double commandment. Each part is essential, each part. To say we love God and not to love others is following only half of the commandment. And following half of the commandment is not following the commandment at all.